Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the greatest games on the Blizzard. My name is Marcus Speller. With me is Jonathan Wilson, and with us is Leon Mann, interviewer, consultant, filmmaker, founder of BComs and the Football Blacklist. And you might remember him presenting on BBC Sport and ITV Sport as well. Leon, pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Amazing to be here. Thanks so much for the invite, and I hope people do remember. It's a little while ago that I was on TV. I'm holding on to that. So
I,
yeah, great to be here.
I certainly remember well. Today we go back to the FA Cup semi-final between Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur at Wembley in the spring of 1991. Of course, it finished Spurs 3, Arsenal 1. Why have you chosen this game, Leon?
Well, I'm going to give my age away here because I was 10 years old at the time, and when I was asked, what game would you like to look back at? I mean, there's loads of games I've been at, fantastic games. That I've had, real strong emotions around for lots of different reasons. But actually, this is a game I think that made me fall in love with football, if that's not too cheesy. But certainly form a special relationship with it, and also just the dynamics between Tottenham and Arsenal, and the supporter base of Tottenham and Arsenal at that time. What was going on in the school playgrounds around who would you support, Tottenham or Arsenal, as a North Londoner, and the race dynamics around that, which I thought were really interesting looking back at it now. I was also, as a 10-year-old, kicking a ball around ball courts at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, so had an insider's view as a 10-year-old in terms of what was going on in and around the club with Gaz's antics and Vinny Samways when he was having his time off, sitting with the guy who used to look after the car park at Tottenham Hotspur and things like that. So I thought it'd be a good game to look back on.
Jonathan, I think it's the first semi-final to be played at Wembley Stadium in the FA Cup.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think this is something that I'm a little bit older than well, a lot older than you, a little bit older than Leon, and so I remember when the FA Cup semi-finals weren't even on telly, and that ended with Hillsborough. One of the consequences of Hillsborough was the decision made that games would be screened live to try and discourage fans without tickets from going to games. Not that was a contributory factor to Hillsborough, but you can see why they realised that could be a problem. So in 1990, we'd had two of the greatest games of football ever played as the semi-finals, with Crystal Palace beating Liverpool 4-3, and then Manchester United drawing 3-3 with Oldham, and that just the difference in sort of football culture, in that they were really worried, would people be able to watch two games in the same day? And they stuck on the EastEnders omnibus in between those two matches. So this game is, then the following year, we've now got that pattern of both the semi-finals being screened live on the Sunday. But yes, because this is a North London derby, they decided Wembley was the most appropriate location for it. So it was the first semi-final played at Wembley. And I think Paul Stewart sort of said it didn't feel right. It felt this was slightly devalued the final by doing that. But obviously, in terms of a big stadium for getting as many fans as possible and the location, from a logistical point of view, it did make sense.
Yeah, well, in the 2 seasons previous to the 1990-91 season, Arsenal, of course, had famously won the league at Anfield in 1989. Spurs finished 6th that season. In 89-90, they were much closer. Spurs finished 3rd, 1 point above Arsenal in 4th. And of course, this season, Arsenal would be quite imperious in the league. They won the title. They only lost 1 game. How was the lie of the land? At the moment, it's a bit of an interesting one. Spurs fans will certainly argue that they are the better side in North London, and I've no doubt you're one of them, Leon. And Arsenal fans will still perhaps cling to what are now former glories and say, well, come on. I mean, growing up in the 90s, I did, and then once you get into the noughties, Arsenal were the dominant side in North London. Did it feel like that at the time? Because Arsenal, under George Graham, they sort of became the Arsenal that perhaps we know, or certainly knew, in the 90s and the noughties.
Yeah, I mean, it was a weird dynamic at the time because, I remember I grew up on Green Lane's Haringey, for anyone who knows their London geography, and it's not very far from Highbury. So when Arsenal would score, I could hear it in my house. So you can imagine, as a Tottenham Hotspur fan, being sat there and hearing all this success
Taunting
emanating from taunting me from Highbury. And the night that they won that title famously at Anfield, the roads around where I was growing up, it was just horns beeping, flags, people out in the streets. It was nuts. So I kind of sometimes wonder how I became a Tottenham fan because of that. Because Tottenham were a good team for sure, finishing third in the league. I think it was '89. I think it was around that time that we finished third in the league. And we had the stars. To have Gaza and to have Lineker, and before that have Waddle, and before that it was Hoddle. There's always been a good reason to turn up to White Hart Lane to watch a game. Just watching those incredible, gifted players alone was a big reason for that. But in terms of my personal experience, Arsenal were winning loads of games. Or the playground, as you can imagine, there were lots of Arsenal shirts, not so many Tottenham shirts. And I had this added dynamic, which is one of the reasons why I chose this game, is, being a young black guy going to school at a very kind of multicultural school, I'd get asked a question by lots of my friends. So why do you support Tottenham? All the black players play for Arsenal. Because they had the Campbells, the Paul Davis, the Rocastles, and then obviously went on later on to have the Ian Wrights, Thierry Henrys, etc. So even walking to games with my dad through the park, Bruce Castle Park, I would be like, it felt like the black kid in the Tottenham shirt, surrounded by black kids in Tottenham, all in Arsenal shirts, with names on the back or numbers on the back, representative of those black players, those black role models. And I used to make a strong case to say, no, Tottenham have got Vinny Samways. He looks like he could be black. So it was kind of like this real strange dynamic. But because my dad was a Tottenham fan, obviously, that's passed down in the family, and that was important for me to support Spurs as well. But it felt in the playground, and that's kind of what I lived day to day, like I was in the minority, and like I should probably be supporting Arsenal for different reasons, which I couldn't get my head around as a 10-year-old, but obviously it was quite apparent why. And Tottenham were winning games, but not as many as Arsenal.
That is quite fascinating, because you go to White Hart Lane now, or any time in the kind of the last sort of 10 years or 15 years, so different.
Well, I mean, it is slightly this particular slice of time, because I mean, Tottenham had black players. I mean, they had Mitchell Thomas, they had Garth Crooks. It wasn't like an Everton or a Blackburn situation where there was no black players for a long time. I think it's something slightly unusual about this particular generation of Tottenham.
Yeah, I mean, I'd look back and see Danny Thomas as well was another black player, but again, that was before my time when I was truly kind of following football. But Mitchell Thomas, I mean, I see Mitchell Thomas out and about now, so I'll be careful what I have to say. But maybe wasn't the best player that has ever played for Tottenham Hotspur.
Sure.
But certainly, couldn't ever say the guy didn't try very hard. But when you looked across at, what was happening, I mean, to have a player like David Rocastle and, Paul Davis, and it was more than just the players on the pitch. It was like Arsenal would go into the community. At that time, Tottenham Hotspur didn't really do that, not in the same way. They're excellent at it now, as are Arsenal, but Arsenal were really getting into the community in their kind of under 23s or reserves, as it was known. In the youth teams, you'd see numbers of black players there. It kind of felt like the club had a relationship with their black community, and Tottenham sat in the middle of a incredible black community, just didn't have those relationships. If you looked at the teams, the youth teams, and as a kid, I was really geeky about it. I would look through, I'd know all the schools, the under 16s, under 18s. I was just obsessed with it all. I really was. And even going to kind of, like I say, kick a ball around in the ball courts as a 10-year-old at Spurs, you'd look around and you just wouldn't get that sense of a club that was truly diverse or interested in engaging with its local community.
Representative of its area, perhaps,
Absolutely.
And to chuck another name at Arsenal, I mean, of course, the hero of that famous title win at Anfield was Michael Thomas. So it only kind of adds to that as well. But looking at the management of both sides, Jonathan, Terry Venables and George Graham, quite sort of differing styles, you could say. I mean, Venables, though, not that long previously, was at Barcelona in the European Cup final, so they had real pedigree in their coach.
Yeah, I guess this goes back to what we were talking about with Rob Draper about the use of the offside trap. But the other thing that interests me here is, I looked at the team sheet. It took me a little while to work out what formation they played. But they played 4-5-1, and that seems such an odd thing. But I knew they played a 4-5-1 in '87 when they got to the cup final, and I remember can't remember which year it was, but I was coming back from a Europa League final, and I was at Heathrow. It was late at night, almost deserted, and there's basically me and David Pleat are the only two people waiting for luggage. And David Pleat collars me and goes, "Yeah, in your book, you talked about Everton pioneering the midfield five. What about me? What?" And he goes on about how he pioneered, and obviously it carries over here, and I guess that's what allowed Tottenham to play Gascoigne in quite a free role. That they had Samways and Allen wide, and then they had Howells and Paul Stewart as sort of more, or Howells sitting deep and Stewart as a more sort of up and down midfielder, and obviously later became a centre forward. By the time he was at Manchester City and then Sunderland, he was a number 9. But that same shape of having the very deep lying central midfielder, which allows this sort of fluidity ahead of them, I guess that was David Pleat introduced that at Tottenham, and Terry Venables carried that on. And then on the other side, of course, you have George Graham and the very rigid 4-4-2.
Yeah, I mean, the styles in this game, we'll talk about the game perhaps after the break, but the styles are all there to see in this one match in particular. But it is funny, though, Leon, because I remember this Spurs side very fondly. I mean, Lineker and Gascoigne are footballing royalty in this country, of course. But they only finished 10th in the league this year. Of course, they went on to win the FA Cup, so it'll be well remembered. But do you think this Spurs side would I be right in saying for someone of your generation, would this be one of the sides that you would remember the most fondly, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was just because of Gaza alone, and of course, Lineker. Just having those two, off the back of Italia '90. It was just magic for as a 10-year-old to have watched that tournament and everything that happened within that, and then know that the two stellar players coming back from that and coming back to you week in, week out was just absolutely sensational. But I think at that time, I mean, our left back was Pat Van Den Houw. I mean, probably the most violent. I don't want to get into trouble here. He's probably, but one of the most violent left backs I've seen in my life. I mean, and some of the tackles that I saw were incredible over the years. I mean, I think my dad was putting his hand over my eyes at different times.
And this was when Stuart Pearce was knocking around as well. We should say.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you had some real kind of hard players around that time. I mean, Paul Stewart, because it started off for him at Spurs when he was like playing up front. He was playing as a striker. It just wasn't quite happening. He was like a target man, and then he kind of got moved back into this kind of midfield role that he kind of went on to play particularly well for us. I know it didn't work out well when he went on to Liverpool afterwards, or not as well as it should have done maybe. But yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of a mystery why this team didn't do better than it should have done. I mean, I guess there's question marks maybe on the quality of the defence when you look at the defence of some of the other clubs around that time.
I think that is the issue, isn't it? It's that back four. I mean, I think Van den Houw ended up playing on the right in this game, and Justin Edinburgh played on the left. So when you have to make shifts like that, it doesn't work. And okay, you got Gary Mabbott there, but obviously getting towards the end of his career, and Sedgley alongside him, a decent player, but not, certainly not the equivalent of Richard Gough, who'd played in the '87 final. So I think you look at the front of the team and think, yes, that's brilliant. You look at the back of the team and think, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And I mean, there's players in there like Vinny Samways, for example, used to get a lot of stick from the Tottenham fans. I think he was just before his time. Such a neat and tidy, lovely technical player. but they called him Vinny Sideways. I think some of the fans, or some of the fans that sat near me, shall we say, who were quite vocal. But I used to love watching him play because of just the way that he could control the ball, take the ball, his movement, a thinking player. I mean, he went on to play in Spain, I think, didn't he? So, and did pretty well out there. So, that's no surprise to me. I just think there are some players I remember of that time who were just before the time of the Premier League and where it kind of moved to in years to come. And I just circle Gazza and Lineker on this little piece of paper I've got here, and of course Naeem off the bench was a nice player to watch as well. But there was a magic about this team, and of course that cup run, because there was some real standout games. The game at Portsmouth that Gazza was absolutely incredible in, and then we started our cup run in a gale up at Blackpool that year. So it was like the windiest game of football I think I've ever seen on Match of the Day. It was just like literally blowing a gale. I don't know how they managed to play football in that. The Notts County game that I was at, that they kind of managed to progress through, which I think Gazza had a particularly good game. There was a lot going on. It's always easy to look back and say there was a lot of magic going on that year because we went on to win it. There's been a lot of magic, and we've not got past the semi-final in the past. So.
But I think you're particularly right about Gazza. I mean, Gazza, we sort of, in the end, we remember this cup run for the way it ended and the terrible consequences that had for his career. But he was a top scorer in the competition. He scored 6 goals this season. And I think the Portsmouth game, I think there's a famous goal he scores against Oxford in this run as well. That if you the sort of standard sort of compilations of Gazza highlights, a lot of them are from this cup run.
It was just all about Gazza. It was all about just this free spirit of a footballer who just could do stuff that others just could only dream of doing. So it was anytime he had the ball, bums off seats, what's going to happen now? And then to have someone like Lineker in front of him was really, really special. And I'd say we were spoiled. Sometimes you find yourself watching games and think, geez, I really have been spoiled over the years. Some of the dross I'm watching right now.
Yeah. Can I just say, as a Sunderland fan, I don't feel that.
Yeah. Oh,
it was just a special time for Tottenham, and look, in terms of what's gone on since then, we haven't won much. I think what is it, a League Cup or two. I've been to a lot of finals, but I haven't been happy off the back of them. So and certainly a lot of semi-finals in that time as well.
Sure. Well, we'll have a quick break, refresh ourselves, and then we'll talk about the match itself. See you in a moment, everybody. Welcome back to the greatest games on the Blizzard. Gentlemen, we get to the semi-final itself at Wembley Stadium. And going into this match, Jonathan, I mean, you would surely have Arsenal down as favourites, just the way they were playing in the league. I mean, you mentioned the Tottenham backline not being the best. I mean, this is the classic, or a classic, Arsenal backline with Dixon, Adams, Bold, Winterburn, Seaman behind them. I understand Spurs had an attacking threat as well, but Arsenal had quality all over the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those classic cup matchups. You have the inconsistent, brilliant team on the one hand, and the absolutely relentless, grinding machine on the other. This machine, as you said, only lost 1 game all season in the league. But you did think maybe in a cup game, given how well they've played, okay, not necessarily against the highest level of opposition in the previous rounds, and that sense that Gazza on his day, Lineker on his day, could win any game. So I think it was one of those games where, yes, there was an obvious favourite, but you could equally see ways in which the underdog could win the game.
Yeah, were you concerned going into this one, Leon, or were you just really pumped for the game?
No, I mean, yeah. I mean, look, I was so young at the time. I was just, buzzing to be going to Wembley to watch my team. It was just huge. And
so was this your first time at Wembley?
Yeah, that would have been my first game at Wembley for sure.
So you had that whole thing of walking from Wembley Park, going down Wembley Way, seeing the Twin Towers, that whole kind of the whole cliche, but it is brilliant the first time you do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong now, I can't stand that cold walk from the station up to Wembley, and certainly coming back when you lost and standing in the queues and stuff. But at that time, it was absolutely magical. The Twin Towers, I mean, still to this day, I do think those Twin Towers are so special. And yeah, and just.
Do you know what was in them? Do you know what they contained?
No.
So one of them was a generator for the stadium. This is just before they knocked them down. I went into the piece on this. So one of them was a generator for the stadium. The other one, it was just a storeroom where they kept all the flags they'd ever flown at Wembley, and the pride of place was a North Korean flag which had never been used because for the 1966 World Cup there was a whole political drama around it because North Korea was still not officially recognised by the British government. So for the 66 World Cup, they only had anthems and flag ceremonies for the opening game and the final, and they didn't do it for any games in between, so they didn't have to show a Korean flag or play the Korean national anthem. So they had the North Korean flag ready, but they never used it.
Oh my word! Right, okay. Oh,
I just assumed you were going to say one of them was used by Jimmy Hill as an office or something.
No, it was incredibly disappointing because I'd sort of gone thinking there was going to be something amazing in there, and it's a dusty storeroom full of wicker baskets and a generator.
I think the flags are quite interesting. I think there's a story behind that. I think that's.
Look, I got 800 words out of it. Put it that way.
There we go. You see, there we are, and that's the main thing. I mean, yeah, my first game at Wembley was England beating, I think, the Czech Republic 2-0 in a routine friendly. So this was for a first game, especially as you're a Tottenham fan, Leon. This was quite something. And straight from the off in this game, Spurs fly out the traps.
Yeah, it was just sensational, just so good. Because as you say, turning up to that game, you're thinking, oh, right, what's going to happen here? This could be really grim because Arsenal, this relentless machine, all the kind of, I was going to say banter, but it wasn't really, I guess it was child banter, whatever you want to call it, kind of bullying borderline about how crap your team is and how great their team is and can't wait to see you at school on Monday. And people were stunned that I was going to the game because it wasn't, it's a normal comprehensive school and a lot of people just weren't able to go to games or there weren't structures in place necessarily within families for people to be going to games with their mums or dads or however it was. So, it kind of felt like I was like the only kid at the school going to this game because, my dad, big football fan, there was no way he wasn't going to be going to that game, and it was a big part of our relationship going to games. We still go to games now, or used to. Hopefully, we'll go again in next season. But I mean, so going to Wembley was massive. Having this kind of Tottenham flag, which poke every person's eye out on the way to the game, I think, and getting in there, hearing the noise, this kind of amazing noise. And just seeing happy Tottenham fans. That's one thing about a final, because sometimes when your team is inconsistent, you can turn up and people are getting ready for a bit of a moan fest before a ball's been kicked, right? Because just the atmosphere around the club at times, etc. But everybody was just really positive, and despite this huge challenge, I think everyone knew that, look, it's a derby, anything can happen. It's a one-off game, and we've got Gaza. And we've got Lineker, so anything can happen. And then, of course, within the first 5 minutes, it was just, and I remember it all really clearly because I was obviously very excited. I'm standing on my seat, and everyone's standing around me. And there's a guy who's like, it was quite a warm day, and there was a guy who clearly had come to the game on his bike, his motorbike. So he's kind of head to toe in these kind of leathers and sweating away, and he's just next to us, and I just looking at him, kind of trying to work out like what's going on here, kind of thing. And we got the free kick, and being very excited, I jumped up on my chair and went, Dad, he's going to shoot. He's going to shoot. And my dad went, calm down. It's almost like, football knowledge wise, don't be silly. He ain't shooting from there. And he said, he ain't shooting from there. Down. And pulled me down. I was like, okay. Right, okay. And then we all know what happened next.
Yeah. Well, even Barry Davis on commentary,
it's one of the great bits of commentary.
I mean, it was great. And Seaman, like David Seaman then was just how do we beat this guy? It's almost like that Schmeichel kind of thing of he's going to save everything. This guy, he saves everything. So to see him hit the top corner in that way, and I know that Seaman got something on it, but from where I was
so hard, I don't think that. I mean, Seaman then makes a mistake later on, but this I don't think is a mistake. I think it's just hit so cleanly, so hard. But yeah, that Barry Davis commentary, the whole bit, is Gascoigne going to have a crack? He is, and then and then the
I say,
schoolboy's own stuff.
Yeah.
It was just magic, and I'm pretty sure because of Arsenal winning all those games, and I won't do myself any favours here, but in the way that they were winning those games, I'm sure lots of people who weren't Tottenham fans were jumping up and down at home, or certainly leaning forward into it with a smile, given the way that it had all unfolded.
Oh, and people just wanted Gazza to do well. Gazza was such a bubbly, engaging personality, and particularly with the World Cup only the year earlier, people wanted to watch Gazza. He was just somebody your eye was immediately drawn to. I mean, I remember. This is still in the days when I went to church, and I just got in from church. Literally turned on the telly to watch Gazza take the run up, and I remember very clearly, kind of the thought going through my head of, what's he doing? Too far out. It's stupid. Because he is. Yeah. Sometimes the memory sort of expands these things, but he genuinely is 35 yards out.
Yeah.
It's not an exaggeration. He's twice as far. You can put 2 penalty areas there to get to the goal.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said about church there, because I'm pretty sure I missed this game because I was at church as well, or something, or coming back or something. Yeah, interesting. But I mean, that first sort of 5 minutes, and then of course, 5 minutes later, Spurs, another beautiful move. I mean, that it was such scintillating stuff, Leon. That first 10 minutes, it was incredible. And Gascoigne was involved. He just seemed to be involved in everything. And what I think we loved about Gazza when he was in his peak was when he got to the finals, or the semi-final as it was in this case, when he got to the big stage, some players are looking around and thinking, right, okay, head on, focus. Other players maybe shrink a little bit. Some kind of, all right, let's play our way into the game. Gazza, it was like, it was like a kid. You see the playground and just runs towards it. That's where I'm meant to be. I can't believe his luck that he's there.
Absolutely,
and youthful exuberance he played with.
Absolutely, and I think when you look back at the television footage of them coming out the tunnel, he actually just looks straight down the lens and does one of his faces as he's. One of these kind of childlike, I'm on TV kind of faces, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this young guy has no fear at all. It's that real magical period. We saw it with Rooney when Rooney broke onto the scene. It's just like I could do anything. Like
Rooney had more of a scowl rather than a smile, though, I think.
No, but you're right. It's that same thing of like the bigger the stage, the more inspired he is. I think certainly with Rooney, there was a sense he almost needed the stage to get the absolute maximum out of him. Gazza was such a sort of random sort of figure that sometimes he'd be inspired, sometimes he wouldn't, and you could see in the final that it went too far. But here, the second goal is a little bit annoying in that it ends up just being stabbed over the line. But the move to get the interaction between Gascoigne and Stewart to get it out to Paul Allen, and then the cross. All of that is so slick and so clever and so smart and so incisive. And then I think it's Alan Smith who ends up blocking the cross, and it's just poked over the line. Classic Lineker scuffing in from 3 yards. But the movement to get to the position to make the cross is brilliant.
Oh yeah, it was lovely, kind of little 1-2 play, and Gazza obviously is central to all of that. And for me, the old Wembley. And I say the new Wembley, when you're watching a game from the stands, you don't see much apart from the celebration at times. So actually, just to see those 2 arms go up in that kind of trademark Lineker kind of celebration, I just couldn't believe it. I was like 2-0, 2. Yeah. This is the best. This there's sometimes it happens at football matches. Of course it does. Just the magic happens. It's just like everything is going right. Everything's going our way. And it doesn't make much sense because it's not really meant to play out like this, but everything's going our way, and it just felt like, right, this is our game. We're going to push on here. We're playing well. We're confident. And then of course they go and get one back before half time, which is like, Oh, right. Okay. Maybe this is definitely a Tottenham game in terms of we might be disappointed here. Let's see how this plays out.
And again, it's such a classic Arsenal goal. You sort of if you'd said before the game, describe the goal you think Arsenal might score against this defence. It is Lee Dixon whipping it in. Lee Dixon in loads of space for some reason. Nobody's got anywhere near him. He's giving him time to measure the cross, putting in a really good ball, and then Alan Smith just being bigger and taller and stronger and better in the air than I think it was Steve Sedgley got above, and then that perfectly placed header back across goal, and so. I guess the fact it's such a characteristic goal. This is exactly what we thought might happen.
Yeah, no, exactly, and certainly that set off the doom and gloom clientele around us, scaremonger. Oh, here we go again, and it was so positive up until that point. But yeah, you kind of were fearing for the worst in some ways, but actually because we've been playing so well, the majority of fans were like, no, look what we're doing here. We're playing football. We've been great all of this campaign, and let's see what happens in the second half. And in many ways, it's that when you win a game 5-0, yes, it's amazing. It feels great, but actually, that roller coaster of emotions when you come out the back of it and you've won, there is something about that kind of gets you coming back again. Like,
no Hollywood film, it all goes well. There's got to be an element of jeopardy.
Oh,
you know what I mean? There's got to be an element of doubt of, hang on, we might not have this.
Exactly. Yeah. And knowing our defence, knowing the way that we were wanting to push forward and play football, and knowing that they had been just so reliable and relentless, it just set up that second half perfectly. And thankfully it ended how it ended. For us,
Arsenal were pushing, of course, Jonathan. I mean, Nigel Winterburn burst through in the second half and sort of flicked over. It was kind of a full stretch. I wouldn't say it was a dreadful miss or anything, but it just went over the bar. But they were pushing for an equaliser for Arsenal, which would of course leave space up the other end.
Yes, and it's a classic breakaway, and again, it's elevated by a classic bit of Barry Davis commentary that Gary Mabbott wins the ball, and you see there the class of Mabbott that he doesn't just belt it forward. He takes his time. He measures the pass. Lineker makes the run.
Lineker's in his own half.
Lineker, just inside his own half when he gets it. Yeah, makes the run, and Vinny Samways makes the decoy run ahead of him, and Lineker uses him by not using him. To Barry Davis's brilliant phrase, and then sort of a right-footed shot that really shouldn't go in, but somehow squeezes through David Seaman's hands, and he sort of parries it just inside the post. But I think the whole it's a Samways run and Lineker's intelligence in just keeping going, which sort of offsets everything. I would assume David Seaman found his position wasn't quite right because of that and was having to reset, and that's why he. Yeah, if you want to find a technical explanation for that, I assume that's what it would be. But I know that David Seaman was very unhappy with that and blamed himself. But it is brilliance from Lineker and Samways and Mabbott as well.
Yeah,
sorry,
Mark. I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, being in the stadium at the time, you didn't get a sense that Seaman had made the mistake that he'd made. It's only when you went home and you watched it. So it felt like, oh my word, it really is our day in terms of Lineker goes across it finds that bottom corner against Seaman. It was just like this is just meant to be our day. And looking back at the footage, I mean, I don't think Vinny Samways gets the credit he deserves actually, because he kind of, he makes that space with that run. He could have easily have just kind of been static there, and that space wouldn't have existed. And then Lineker going past Tony Adams, is every Spurs fan's dream. That's the dream scenario. And I mean, David Seaman, nicest man in the world from my interactions with him. Obviously, I wasn't too worried that he didn't have a good game that day.
But it was surprising though, because again, people might think, oh, well, David Seaman, he did have a bit of a rick in him. It's very unfair. He was a top quality keeper, but Arsenal, They only lost one game in the league, as I mentioned earlier, but they only conceded 18 goals in 38 league games. This is not a side that would concede 3 goals in a game, Jonathan. You know, this was quite rare to see Arsenal being, well, I suppose you could say, taken apart like this.
Yeah, it all goes back to Gascoigne's brilliance for the first goal. That obviously then sets in place the dynamic of the game. But yeah, this is the classic back four, the Dixon, Winterburn, Bold, Adams back four, at the absolute height of its powers. I guess what you would say is that Lineker's pace, which he's maybe started to lose the absolute lightning pace he had, say, in '86, but his pace and more importantly the intelligence of his runs are the exact thing to exploit the space behind a back four that pushes up, or as you see here, just to run at them and to know not to release the ball. I guess you can maybe say that somebody in Arsenal's midfield should have got to him quicker. So whether that would have been Thomas or Davis, somebody should have closed him down. But once they haven't, I'm not sure the defending there's actually that much wrong with it, and it's just they have to follow Samways, and that does create the space. And Adams gets a bit flat-footed, and so then can create the space for the shot past him.
Yeah, Liam, we should also mention at the other end, we're talking about David Seaman, big Eric Torsfet, who had a good game himself. You know, he made some important saves and important blocks, and he was a huge presence in the Tottenham goal.
Yeah, no, Eric the Viking was it just feels like that team had loads of characters, across the team, and you know everyone had a real strong identity with the supporters. You know, everyone kind of had this affection towards every single one of these players down here, albeit having a slightly different emotion at times to Vinny Samways because of an understanding of football that I think was just different, what people were used to. This is what we expect from a midfielder. It's not about lots of intricate little passes here and there. It's about get it forward. You know, even with this traditional Spurs playing good football, you know, I think there were frustrations with Samways. But I mean, with Eric,
I think that's really interesting because the podcast we did with Rob Draper, and that we were talking about a game between Watford and QPR in '82 when you had Venables on managing QPR and you had Graham Taylor managing Watford, and he saw two opposing schools of English football. But Venables' football was very possession based. It was very continental. It was very different, and that I guess is why he's able to take on this 4-5-1 shape. And it was based on sort of non-traditional virtues. And so I think it is really interesting that you get this. This is another one of those meetings between the traditional 4-4-2 manager in George Graham and the more forward-thinking, more continental Venables on the other side. And for fans, I guess particularly because the culture of football is very different then. The level of punditry in terms of the detail of analysis on TV and in the papers was very different to what we have now. I guess fans wouldn't necessarily grasp what was going on. They would see Samways as being a little bit something a bit sterile in the way he played, something a bit over-cautious, over-conservative.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feeling was he overplays. You know, why does he need all those touches? Oh, he's played the ball backwards again. You know, that was always the thing. I mean, imagine, that supporter base watching the Manchester City with Yaya Toure, who play in that kind of defensive midfield role towards the back end of his career, where he's kind of playing, hundreds of passes, it feels like, between the centre backs and the full backs and moving the ball around to be able to find the pass. I mean, I think that would be deeply frustrating to that audience at that time. And I'd compare Vinny Samways with Paul Allen, and Paul Allen's a lovely guy, works for the PFA, great guy. And Paul Allen is just very direct, and that's what the expectation was. Paul gets the ball, he knocks it past. He's a technical player, but he knocks it and he goes. Whereas Vinny would always kind of like look inside, where's the pass, where's the little 1-2s? It wouldn't be push and run. It would be something very kind of different and very technical. And I actually loved watching it at the time. I didn't really get the frustration of like, we've got the ball, what's the problem? As long as we've got the ball, then we're okay. It's when we give the ball away, that's when I'm really concerned, because these guys at the back, they're trying their hardest, but they're not of the level of the opposition's backline in the case of an Arsenal, if we were up against it. So
not to go down too much of a tactical tributary, but of course George Graham had worked with Venables and credits Venables for teaching him how to play the offside trap. So there's almost this sort of it's not master and apprentice relationship, but Venables knows what he's doing because Venables has told him how to do it. So there is that sort of you see these two different strands of British football, but they do cross and they do interact with each other.
Yeah, and one thing that was notable to me in that season, and it's a small thing but kind of reflective of what players learned when they were abroad, is just the different way that Gary Lineker would warm up compared to the rest of the guys. Gary Lineker would come and just run without the ball, and people would be like, "What's he doing?" The rest would just come and lump balls about, basically almost Sunday league. It's what we kind of do in Sunday league. We kind of lob the ball about, I guess, getting a touch and getting a feel for it. But he would actually have this routine that involved him coming out, and you just see him just running up and down the centre line there, just up and down, little sprints, little turns. And now we see, of course, Premier League teams all doing that together. It's a completely different way of warming up. But, Gary Lineker, in terms of how he conserved energy, everything he did on the pitch just was so classy. It's almost like how he presents now. There's so much preparation. There's so much thought behind it. And you could see that. And I used, as a kid, I'd want to be there really early to watch all the warm-ups because I was fascinated by all of that. That was just something which I was, sometimes it was better than the match. I'd fun watching them do the warm-up. But just the different ways that different players warmed up. Then, of course, they're not allowed to do it now. But I think that was kind of, again, just talks to that point of the continental approach, shall we say, compared to, what football was, what British football, English football was back then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, Spurs would go on and beat Nottingham Forest in this final 2-1. But looking at the scenes at the end of this game, Jonathan, it was almost like this was a final in itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's semi-finals are massive. Semi-finals against your biggest rivals, particularly when those rivals are threatening to win a double, are obviously that much bigger. So,
and at Wembley.
Yeah. So I think there's always a danger when you have a big semi-final win that somehow that takes the emotional energy out of you and you can't then reproduce it in the final. And the final, I think, very easily could have gone the other way. But they did come back from behind in that game despite losing Gaza and despite missing the penalty, and they did win it.
Yeah, that final, and I won't talk too much about it, but I guess there's a reason why I've chosen the semi-final. And well, we won that game, and it was brilliant that we won it, and just the experience of being at Wembley, just then to now, just in terms of how unsafe it was actually at Wembley with these seats, these backless seats, and
oh my goodness,
all of that kind of stuff. And when there was a goal, everyone kind of, as a kid, it was really scary. I mean, football generally, as a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, going to games, away games back then, and with Hillsborough, etc. It was really kind of, there was something. Yeah, it was scary or magical. It was football just then was just a real different place. As a kid going there and watching the games, pulling yourself up to be able to watch the game at West Ham. I was lifting up my mates to go and watch the game as well because you just could hardly see from how it was set up. QPR was another one, which was terrible, like for kids. If you were down the front, and normally your dad would or your mum would send you down the front to watch the game, and they'd be towards the back of the terrace. Like literally, you're pulling yourself up, and then you've got this. You can just see their feet. That was football back then. But that that FA Cup final was just a completely different emotion throughout the game. There wasn't any real wonderful football from us that I can remember. I just remember just this sense of doggedness and being determined and against all odds. And we ruined Brian Clough's big day. That was ultimately the upshot of that. We ruined that day. And I was, my dad took me to the pub. I mean, I know he shouldn't, and if he's watching, sorry, Dad, you didn't take me to the pub if anyone's watching. But he knew the owner of a chain of pubs, and I was able to be hidden away in the corner in this pub, and he had the Nottingham Forest youth team were in there. So it was really interesting, this kind of dynamic in the pub afterwards in terms of not the youth team. I guess they were the reserves because they were old enough to be in there, but this kind of sense of wow, Brian Clough's missed out on this opportunity to win the FA Cup. And
well, not just win the FA Cup, because I think there's a strong possibility had they won it, he'd have retired there and then, because that would have completed everything. He'd have won everything if he'd won that.
Yeah.
And then again, it happened the following year, didn't it? In '92, that he lost in the League Cup final to Manchester United, and that was another chance to go out at the top. And I mean, look, let's not turn this into a Clough podcast. Yeah. But there's the end of 90 minutes in the final. Clough doesn't go and talk to the team.
Yes.
Now there'd been a League Cup game back in the '70s against Spurs when it had gone to extra time, and Clough hadn't gone to speak to the team. And at the time, that was hailed as genius because I guess first maybe Derby probably went on to win the game. I think it must have been Derby. And so it was, Clough knew not to get involved. Here, he just looked like a sad old man who couldn't quite motivate himself. But that's a different story, different podcast.
Yeah. Very, very, very different to the Tottenham bench. Minutes before full time. In fact, I'd say quite a few minutes before full time in that semi-final, where Gazza's leading the chant and it's all smiles. Yeah. I think there's careful lads. Kevin Campbell's smacking the crossbar. Mercer's having a go and so on. But it just seemed after that third goal that Arsenal scored. Tottenham scored with Lineker, of course. Yeah, there were 12 minutes left, and Arsenal had a couple of efforts, but it was without a doubt Spurs' day, and it seemed to be Spurs' day straight from the kickoff, Leon.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the memories of that game and what came after it, of course, because we had Chaz and Dave. It's lucky for Spurs when the year ends in one.
There you go.
Although
how's that
how lucky it's been since then? Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. I mean, we've got the League Cup final.
Snooker loopy?
So, yeah, got that League Cup finals to come, which the small task of Manchester City, but it just everything about that. Saint and Greavesy on the TV, just all these kind of memories come back in terms of what football was back then and what it represented. And I touched on it before, this kind of sense of, Leon, why do you support Spurs? You should support the black team, and that was just a real interesting dynamic. And I think now I don't think that would exist. I like to hope that dynamic wouldn't exist. I mean, looking at the teams, etc., I don't think there's any sense of black team or white team in terms of the playgrounds. I mean, it just would be impossible, right? And then when I found out Bob Marley supported Tottenham, then I kind of made sure I text all my mates who used to tease me back in the day and set them straight. So yeah, it was just a magical time, and that game, just sticks out in my memory and always will. It always will. I mean, even the magic against Ajax from Lucas Moura to get us to a Champions League final, while that will long remain in the memory, of course, we know we didn't go in to win it, so maybe that's the reason why it will feel very different. But that day at Wembley, my first day at Wembley, that will take some beating.
Absolutely. Leon, it's been a pleasure talking to you about this one. Thanks very much for coming on the pod.
No, thank you.
For more stories like that, do check out theblizzard.co.uk. But for myself and Jonathan this week, thanks very much. And we'll see you next time for another great game from the world of football. See you then.